Perfect. So before we begin talking about funding types available through the University of Maryland, I wanted to give you a very quick primer on the type of funding types available. So there are two major funding types: non-dilutive. This is when funding equity does not take, funding entity does not take any equity position of the company. So you get the money, but you don't have to give any portion of your company away in return. And there's dilutive funding, where funding entity takes equity position in the company in exchange for cash. So the very first funding type that usually most startups start with, is self-funding. It's non-dilutive because obviously you're investing in your own startup or your own company. It proves commitment, skin in the game. Anytime you are pitching to angel investors or VCs, a question on how much of your own money did you put into the company will arise. That's important. However, it's very careful not to risk your family's financial security, and also to have full support of your family to make sure that your entire family is on board, that you would invest this money into the company. We'll talk about grants today. So grants are non-dilutive. Usually funding entity does not take equity stake in your company. They don't need to be repaid. So this is great news. Grants are an excellent choice for early stage startup funding. However, you do have to be careful to make sure that grant deliverables actually do not conflict with your commercialization plan, and that the money will go to further your commercialization plan, your strategic plan, and not distract you from that. Again, it's a fantastic mechanism to fund your startup before investors would be willing to invest. Debt financing is another way to fund your company. It is difficult to obtain bank loans, especially for early stage companies when you don't have sales. Loans have to be repaid. In many cases, banks will require collateral or also a personal guarantee as well. So even though the loan would go to your company, oftentimes the bank will also ask you to sign a personal guarantee as well. SBA, Small Business Administration, facilitates loans for small businesses. And some of those loans, they also will guarantee, they will waive personal guarantee, and they will guarantee that to the bank for you. Another equity type is, another funding type is equity financing. Usually starts with friends and family round. Some people also call it friends, family, and fools round. Usually comes in really early. And you have to be very careful because it's very easy to lose good friends and you know, have some family feuds over that. So everybody needs to understand that this is gambling money that can be lost. Next usually come angel investors. Angel investors invest their own personal money. They usually invest earlier, and because they are able to have to be riskier with this money because it's their own money, and usually they invest smaller amount than VCs. Venture capitalists or VCs invest somebody else's money. Because of that, they have lower risk tolerance, and they also invest bigger amounts of money because they invest a little bit down the road. Usually in these cases, both angels and VCs and family and friends put cash into the company in exchange for stock, board seats and such. And sometimes they also take a seat, a board seat, director seat and such. Experienced angel investors or VCs also bring expertise, network, stamp of approval in addition to cash. So it's really important to make sure that you take money from somebody who can bring value in addition to just cash. Somebody who can introduce you to partners, somebody who can introduce you to potential customers, and somebody who has experience in this industry and give you real advice. And also somebody who understands how to be a good angel or a VC and not meddle in your business every day. So this is really important. The earlier equity financing is accepted. That means that the value of your startup is lower. And that also means that investors get bigger price, bigger share for the money that they invest. So it's really important not to accept that money too early so you don't have to give up too much of your company. If you are starting a company as a University of Maryland researcher, professor, or working with one, you're in a very good position to have access to a lot of startup financing. Starting with $50,000 ICOR grant for market research, medical device development fund and such, and Jolene and I will go into details about all of these programs. So Jolene?
Yep, so I'll just jump in here. So as Alla mentioned, the NSF ICOR program is specifically for market research. So there are two sort of forms of this program. One is a shorter, less intensive ICOR called UMD ICOR, and that is a 3-week cohort. And the purpose of that program is to have you conduct at least 30 interviews with potential customers to understand what their pain points are, so that you can make sure that as a technologist who may be developing an innovative solution, that you are in fact addressing the pain points of your potential customers. Then the more advanced and intense version of ICOR is this National Science Foundation ICOR program. This program comes with $50,000 in funding to travel around the country or the world, depending on where your customers may be, to speak to those customers in person, to understand how do they do their jobs, what their challenges are, how do they make purchasing decisions. It's a grant. So the National Science Foundation does not take any equity in the company. So this is a great way for you to learn more about your industry without giving up any of your company. And many of the grants that you are eligible for later on will really look to see that you have done some form of ICOR as a way to validate your market. Because speaking to your customers and learning about your customers will make sure that you are really building something that people want. In order to qualify for this NSF ICOR program, you need to either have worked on a grant that was funded by NSF, or you need to have successfully completed the UMD ICOR program. And this NSF program is very intense. It's 7 weeks long. The team members who participate in the NSF ICOR program should be ready to commit almost full time to this program. But it's a really valuable program. And if you're interested in more information about this, there's an ICOR website at the University of Maryland, icor.umd.edu, where you can learn more about the upcoming UMD ICOR programs and also about this NSF ICOR.
The next program is called MDDF, or Medical Device Development Fund. It is managed by UM Ventures Baltimore and UM Ventures College Park. It's a joint program. It provides funding to take a medical device project up a TRL level. Currently, the Medical Device Development Fund is focused on COVID-19 solutions, and we are reviewing applications, and we have already approved 4 projects to receive funding. So if you're working on a medical device, and especially with a focus on COVID-19 solution, you should submit an application. And if you need more information on how, just send me an email. And next, I will talk about a very important program for University of Maryland researchers to finance their technology in a very efficient way. First, through phase 1 to finance a validation project, and through phase 2 or 3 to finance company formation. So the first phase is called technology validation. It's a $115,000 grant that goes directly to PI lab. There is no overhead, so the university, again, does not take any overhead. Out of $115,000, $90,000 can go toward PI, postdoc, a student salary. You can purchase materials, equipment. You can contract with outside contractors. $10,000 goes to patent budget, and $15,000 goes toward commercialization plan development. This is a grant through the state of Maryland, and our office will help you with the application process. We have a team of very experienced site miners who are not University of Maryland. They're not faculty. They're not researchers. They are business executives, entrepreneurs with a lot of industry experience. Their success rate this past year has been about 75% of these applications were approved. So we have a great team here. After you are done with technology validation phase, which is, by the way, a 9-month project, you can form a company, form a startup, and then apply for the next phase. It's a $150,000 company formation phase. Now, if the previous phase is non-dilutive type of funding, it's a grant, it goes to your PI lab. This is a $150,000 convertible debt note. So it's dilutive funding, but it's still really hard to come by, especially in our region. There are no personal guarantees. And again, the University of Maryland site miner will help you with the application. They will coach you how to present. After you apply for this funding, you have to license technology from the university and such. But again, it's another 9-month project with $150K going all into the company, and you can use it to on the commercialization plan that you developed in the previous phase.
So the next program is called the MIPS Program, the Maryland Industrial Partnerships Program. And this is a grant that a company can apply for in parallel with a researcher at the University of Maryland for a $100,000 grant. That doesn't go to the company, it goes to the lab. It goes directly to the lab for this researcher to do research that will benefit the company. So the company, out of the total $100,000 grant, the company has to provide 10%, and that $100,000 then goes to the lab. Companies can apply for either 1-year or 2-year projects, but a 2-year project will be approved for the first year and then will be reevaluated and then potentially given another grant for the second year. The companies can use this funding to develop new products, whether that be within engineering, computer science, physical sciences, life sciences. You can use this funding to test an existing product if you're looking for data to validate some claims. You can also use this funding to develop training programs for your company and work with faculty in the education school or faculty that have experience training in a particular industry. In order to apply for this program, you have to find your faculty partner before you apply, and the folks in the MIPS program are really helpful if you are looking for someone. So I would recommend that you reach out to Ronnie Gist, who can help you find someone to apply with. And in general, it's good to get in touch with the folks who run this program before the deadline, because they have to give you access to the application. The application for MIPS happens twice a year. The first one we just passed, which was May 1st, and then the second one will be in the fall, and that deadline is October 1st. And again, if you have any questions, Ronnie Gist is the person to reach out to. So another program that we have at the university is called the Chesapeake Bay Seed Capital Fund, and I work on this and manage the day-to-day operations of this fund. This is an early stage investment fund for clean tech startups that are based in the state of Maryland. And when we say clean tech startups, what we mean are any companies that are working on technologies that can quantifiably reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and we just recently added greenhouse gases that are found in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. In order to qualify for this funding, you have to meet that technical requirement. We're also looking for companies that are far enough along that they have a product prototype and that they can point to a demonstrated product market fit. So you've talked to customers, you've validated that they have a need for your technology, maybe you've even sold some of your product, and then we want to see that you have a plan for how you're going to grow your business. We invest either with equity or with a convertible note. We generally do not set the investment terms. We will look to a co-investor with specific industry expertise to set the terms. And we will invest anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 in these early stage seed and Series A investment rounds. So if you have questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. My email's on the slide. And at our website, you can also find out some more information about the fund and apply directly to the fund through our website. So we just got a question in the chat. What is a convertible note? So a convertible note is a type of investment where the company initially gets a loan at with an interest rate, but the idea is that if the company matures and meets certain milestones, that loan will convert into equity at a valuation that is determined in the future. So it sort of allows investors to invest early on before it's really clear how much the company is worth. And it gives investors who invest that early a slight preference in terms of their return. I hope that was helpful. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Alla, do you mind if we move to the next slide? Great, thanks. So the Maryland Momentum Fund is another funding mechanism that's available to companies that are affiliated with UMD. This fund is for companies that are a little bit later stage. the fund is generally looking for companies that have a team in place, that have some protected IP, and that have either some sales or a very sort of solid plan on how to reach sales. The Maryland Momentum Fund, it's a $10 million fund operated out of the University System of Maryland. The fund will invest up to $500K, either as a convertible note or as equity. And in order to qualify for the fund, you have to have some affiliation with the University of Maryland, either as a student, an alum, faculty, staff, or university IP. There's like 11 different ways that you can qualify for the fund. They have tried to make it very accessible. So if you're interested in that, I would check out more information about this fund at the website listed here. One important thing to mention about the Maryland Momentum Fund is that they will not invest unless you have matching investment from another investor. So they don't want to be the only investors putting money into the company. They want to see that you've found someone else who believes in your company enough to also invest. Claire Broida Johnson is the managing director of the Maryland Momentum Fund, and her email is there. So if you're interested in learning more, you can feel free to reach out to her directly. And lastly, the SBIR program. This is a program I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. Just as a little bit of overview, the SBIR STTR program is sort of separated into 3 different phases. Phase 1 is all about concept development, feasibility assessment. Does your proposed technology, is it possible technically? And this phase generally lasts for 6 months, and all of the grants from the different agencies are generally under $150,000 for this phase 1. If you have a successful phase 1 project and apply for a phase 2 project, you could get awarded up to $1 million to continue the development of that technology based on the needs of that particular agency. So phase 2 is focused on prototype development, and they essentially want to see you continue to prove out that technology. And then lastly, if you have a successful phase 2 award, then you're eligible for this phase 3. And for phase 3, there is no allocated SBIR funding. The idea is that you would go directly to federal contracting. So the agency that you are working with, if they find your technology valuable and useful enough, then you'll have the opportunity to become a supplier for the federal government. So I think on the next slide, yep, we're going to show. So these are the agencies that have SBIR programs. There are 11 in total, and they all run their SBIR program slightly differently. They all have their own research needs that they're looking to be met. And so I would recommend that you look specifically at all these different agencies to see what their what proposals they have out, and what kind of technologies they're looking for. And if you can, I think a really great way, what I've heard, a really great way to understand these programs a little bit better is to get in touch with the program managers of the SBIR programs at these different agencies, because they will be able to tell you whether or not the technology that you're considering could be a fit for the proposals that they have out.
Yes, also to add really quickly, so I'm not sure what's going to happen this fall, but usually SBA organizes what they call SBIR bus or road tour. They go all throughout the country and visit different towns and cities where they hold a one-day event where you can learn about the program in general, and where you can meet with representatives and program managers from all these different agencies one-on-one in the same place. Last year, we brought this event to College Park campus. This year, with the COVID-19 restrictions in place, I'm not sure what they're going to do, if they plan to hold a virtual event or how that's going to be handled. But if you visit their website, they'll have the information there.
Yep, and last year that the SBIR roadshow was really successful. They I think there was a program manager from every agency, and they shared a lot of great information. And Alla actually organized that last year.
Yes, it was fun. It was great for me to learn all about it.
Yeah.
And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about angels and VCs. So as I mentioned before, these are people who invest hard cold cash into your company in exchange for equity. Really important to remember here is to go after smart money, which brings not just cash, but also experience, network, industry expertise, and such. On our campus, we actually have one of the most active and biggest angel investor groups in DMV area, Dingman Center Angels. They operate out of Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship at the business school. They invest in regional startups, so not just university startups, any regional startups. And the value to a campus, well, one, students get involved in that, but also faculty startups, when our faculty express interest, I usually take them to see these pitches, what's going on, and it's very educational. It's basically sort of like, you know, a teaching hospital of sorts. You get to watch companies pitch investors, and you get to see the questions that they receive. And you also get to stay after the entrepreneurs leave the room and investors have an honest discussion. Sort of like Shark Tank, but real life. There's no, you know, you get to see what you see on the screen and what you see behind the screen, really raw reaction and such. So it's you know, if you're University of Maryland researching interested, let me know. They do conduct these meetings now virtually. There are a number of angel investor groups in this area. Just a few of them I wanted to mention. Citrine Angels. It's a group of angel investors investing for women by women. Angel Capital Association is a great organization where you can learn more about what angel investing is all about, how it works, and also how to find local groups. And if you go on gust.com, that's sort of like a platform where you could create a profile and send your applications to different groups in and out of the area as well. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody who joined and open the floor to questions. So you can submit questions either by chat or just unmute yourself. You can turn on your camera and submit questions. I know somebody earlier asked a question about ICOR, and with the COVID restrictions, that's not a problem. The April program was conducted online, and I'm assuming they can do the same for August. You know, it's not the same as doing it in person, but you can do pretty much everything online and through Zoom.
Yep, and the same goes for the NSF ICOR programs. Right now, they are allowing teams to conduct most of their interviews virtually. and bank the $50,000 for travel later on. So if any of you have gone through the UMD ICOR program and are interested in the NSF ICOR program, and if you have some available time, now might be a good time to pursue that.
Jolene, Dan Nadish is asking if MIPS funding, is the MIPS funding double if it is a 2-year stint?
So for phase 2 MIPS proposals, the funding level will vary. I believe it's anywhere between $200,000 and $250,000 for a phase 2, depending on the program. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources has a pool of money that they fund MIPS programs, MIPS proposals out of. And so if your proposal has anything to do with mitigating nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, greenhouse gases in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, then you could be eligible for a $250,000 phase 2 award, is my understanding.
All right, we have a question from Neil Schulman. Neil, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my video is not running, but I have a general question. I teach in the graduate civil engineering department, and I teach several project management courses with a construction theme. And one of the aspects of the course that I have incorporated over the last year or two and will continue is using the Shark Tank methodology in my class. And what I'm doing is encouraging students to come up with ideas for innovation and startups, depending on the topic of the course. One of the courses is cost engineering and control. Another is sustainability. And I was wondering, Alla or Jolene, is there anybody in your department that I can collaborate with, or is it you two that I can collaborate with going forward with this endeavor in my class on the Shark Tank theme?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So something I'd like to mention is we have entrepreneurs in residence who are experienced entrepreneurs, and they provide advice. And we can ask one of them to attend one of your Shark Tank events and be the real shark in the room.
Okay.
Another thing, Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship runs a program for student entrepreneurs, and they have a stable of angel investors even, or entrepreneurs in residence and mentors who also might be interested in attending one of your Shark Tank events and be sort of like, you know, the Shark Tank person and provide feedback. Or even Jolene and I can come and do that. We do that on occasion.
Okay, great. I'll going forward, I'll follow up with you to collaborate a little bit more. Okay, good to hear that kind of feedback. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from Dan about, does the product of MIPS require a university licensing agreement, or is it more along the lines of sponsored research? So that's a great question. According to a conversation that Alla and I had before this webinar, if the IP was developed by the university researcher, university faculty, then the university will own that IP and the company can license that technology. If the IP was developed by the company, then the company doesn't have to license it.
And if it's jointly developed, it's jointly owned. Mm-hmm. So the company wants to have exclusive license, they can license university interest, or they can have, you know, non-exclusive license and operate that way. You don't always need exclusive license to operate. And also the nature of MIPS projects is such that you don't necessarily need a license. So for example, if it's building a prototype, using existing designs or testing it and validating it, there's really no IP that you need to license at the end.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So to answer your question, it depends. And it's going to be prescribed, it's going to be written into the MIPS agreement, and you will know ahead of time what the situation is.